Minnesota gardeners, I'm Julie Weisenhorn with University of Minnesota Extension. Today we're going to plant some bulbs in my garden. I chose this location because the soil is really good. I've got some open space for plenty of room for those bulbs to grow. And in the afternoon, we get a lot of good sunlight here. In fact, full sun for about 10 hours. So this is a westerly facing, so it's quite warm, and those bulbs should come up pretty early in the spring. So in Minnesota, we plant spring blooming bulbs in the fall. It's now about the third week of October. I'm in my backyard, and I have chosen some hardy bulbs. These are bulbs that can stay in the ground throughout the year, and they go through a cold period over the winter. In the spring, that cold temperature change allows them to send up a stalk and bloom. One of the things you have to do first is prepare your soil. In my case, I have clay soil, like a lot of us in Minnesota. And you can tell if you do by giving a squeeze to your soil and then seeing if it forms a ball, which mine does. So I'm going to go ahead and amend with some peat moss. Peat moss adds lift and lightness to soil, and it helps to create better porosity, or in other words, better drainage and air pockets in your soil for your roots to grow. So I've used a garden fork to really dig down into the soil, but I'm going to mix the rest of this peat soil in right now. That's pretty good. So I've chosen some really great spring bulbs. Spring bulbs in Minnesota are things like tulips, hyacinth, crocus, daffodils, and also scilla and chionodoxa. So now it's time to dig down and prepare the bed for actually putting in the bulbs. I'm going to just use my trowel for this. Now these bulbs, such as these tulips on the back, it indicates that they should be planted 4 inches deep. I'm going to mix them in with hyacinth, and hyacinth need to be 6 inches deep. And then I'm going to also add a few daffodils, and these need to go in about 4 inches deep. So I've got some different levels of bulbs. How are we going to do that? This is what we're going to do. We're going to go down about 6 inches because that's the deepest part. And I'm going to cluster the bulbs together. Some people will mix the bulbs all together. I like to kind of have big masses of hyacinth and tulips, and then just blend the masses together. So because the hyacinth needs to be 6 inches deep, I'm going to dig my hole at 6 inches to start with. Now I happen to know that from this point of my trowel to this point is 6 inches. So I'm going to use my trowel to help me measure. That looks pretty good. Now you can start placing your bulbs. I'm going to start with these gorgeous purple hyacinth bulbs. And bulbs you'll find have a hairy bottom to them. This is where the roots are. And then they have a pointed tip, and that's the end that the flower stalk will come out of. So you want to place them with this hairy root end in the ground. Now I'm going to place the other hyacinth in a mass. I like to see a lot of color from the same flowers. Again, you can intermix these, no problem. I've got 4 of these great hyacinth bulbs. Now I'm going to plant the tulip bulbs. Now the tulips only require 4 inches deep. So I'm going to go ahead and push some of the soil over to raise them up a little bit. You don't have to be terribly exact about this. The important thing is to get the bulbs deep enough in the ground. These are gorgeous orange tulips. I happen to like the color combination of purple and orange. That's something that you could also decide upon too as you're looking at bulbs. Like the hyacinth, the tulips have a rough end, that's the end with the roots, and a pointed end, and that's the end the flower stalk will come out of. Lastly, I'm going to plant some Jetfire daffodils. These are the same depth as the tulips, according to the back of this label, 4 inches. So I can just tuck them in right in this space. I'm going to cover up these bulbs now, and then we're going to try an experiment. So you'll notice that I left this space empty and kind of cleared away the soil, because I'm going to put in some muscari, or grape hyacinth bulbs. These are very small bulbs that only require a couple of inches of soil to cover them up. And they're early spring blooming before these other plants start to come up. But won't that look great to have those little bulbs come up here, and then one by one these larger bulbs come up? And that's the fun of bulbs, is trying to keep that bulb beauty going all spring long. Now I'm going to cover them up, and remember, they only need a couple inches of soil. That's my bulb planting for this fall. I might try putting some of these crocus in another area of my yard. But the last thing to do is to water the bulbs. And this is something you'll want to do as we go into fall until our ground freezes, especially if we don't get any rains. You can plant bulbs up until it gets quite cold out. So I would say into early November. As long as you can work the soil, you can plant your bulbs. Also, be sure to label where you plant your bulbs. You don't want to go digging these up next spring. So the narcissus came actually with one of its labels. So the daffodil can go right in here. The muscari, or grape hyacinth, will go right here. The tulips are over here. And the hyacinth down here in the back. So that's spring bulb planting in the fall for next spring. I'm Julie Weisenhorn with University of Minnesota Extension. For more information, you can access our webpage at extension.umn.edu.